Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and to the mayor and to the members of local government who are here, and to the folks in Quincy. In many respects, a lot of the work that you've done to capitalize on the opportunities associated with transit-oriented development have been real hallmarks of your administration, but speak to, in some respects, one of the largest issues we face as a Commonwealth, and that issue is creating enough housing that people can afford for this Commonwealth to continue to grow. And this has been a challenge in Massachusetts for many years. I remember going to a campaign event for Mitt Romney when he was running for governor in 2002, where he talked about the housing crisis in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Well, that was 17 years ago. And over the past 19 years, we've added about 600,000 people and have done nowhere near enough housing to keep up with the growth in our population. We used to build about 30,000 new units of housing every year like clockwork for about 50 years. And then starting around 1990, that number fell to less than half of that number, and it's stayed there for the last 30 years. So what happens if you go 30 years without building the kind of capacity that you need in your housing market? You don't have a lot of inventory. Anything that goes on the market becomes incredibly aggressively pursued. That drives up the price of whatever it is, and it forces people farther and farther away from where they would like to live to where they can afford to live. And we've been very lucky in terms of our relationship with our colleagues in the legislature. Thank you for being here, Senator Keenan. We signed last year the largest housing bond bill in state history. We have put significant resources into our housing programs. Undersecretary Janelle Chen is here, Secretary Mike Keneally's here. Over the course of the past 5 years, $1 billion has been invested by our administration. But the simple truth of the matter is, given the way the rules work, the way the system works, the way it's organized right now, we are simply never going to be able to create enough housing at every level to meet the needs and requirements of the people of Massachusetts. And you know, when Amazon, which has a big footprint in Massachusetts, and I fully expect will continue to grow here because it's a great state for a company like that to be in, when they were looking at Massachusetts as a possible location for their second headquarters, they made very clear to us the single biggest challenge we faced in competing for that headquarters was the cost of housing in Massachusetts. I want you to think about that for a minute. They ended up choosing New York City and the greater Washington, D.C. area. Not exactly inexpensive housing markets, but they were inexpensive relative to this one. We lead the country in education. We lead the country in energy efficiency. We lead the country in innovation. We also have the highest median house prices and the highest median rents in the U.S. Now, I like being number one in a whole bunch of categories. I don't like being number one in that one. And we currently have legislation that's pending before the legislature that would make it possible for us to produce 135,000 units of housing over the next 4 or 5 years, get us back into the business of producing the kind of housing, senior housing, multifamily housing, young person's housing, starter apartments, the kinds of stuff that we need to make sure that old folks like me, who live in a house that has a whole bunch of empty bedrooms, have some place to go, perhaps in the community in which we grew up in. It becomes a big part of how people can reimagine their downtown, something that the mayor has been very successful at doing. I mean, think about this. We have 351 cities and towns. Their downtowns historically were anchored by retail. That was the way you sort of created a vibrant downtown. Well, guess what? The aforementioned Amazon and other internet sellers have made it pretty hard to make a downtown work purely on the back of retail. So downtowns now need to be about housing, hospitality, entertainment, recreation, office space, and yes, retail. But that kind of reimagination of a downtown to create the vibrancy that all 351 cities and towns would like to see in the future, under the way we've currently set up the rules of the game and the process, it is very difficult for people to figure out how to make that happen. And even small incremental advances can turn out to be enormously painful for communities to get done. And as an economic issue, as an equity issue, as a community development issue, as a quality of life issue, this Commonwealth needs to do more to invest in its housing infrastructure and its housing generally at every level of the stack. And with partners like the mayor and others, I'm sure we can get it done, but we desperately need to get legislation passed that enables cities and towns to work with the state and to do the work that they need to do to make this happen. And that's what our Housing Choice Bill is all about. And I sincerely hope that at some point during this legislative session, we have a chance to get back into the business of producing the kind of housing that our citizens need and deserve. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Governor.